This was the scene in Orlando yesterday. 3 playoff games were scheduled to be played, all of them postponed after the Milwaukee Bucks decided, you know what, we're not going to take the court. Their game against the Orlando Magic postponed. 2 other games also postponed as the NBA and its players deal with an issue that's bigger than basketball. And Mannix, you're down there in Orlando. You're down there on the NBA campus. Take me through the Milwaukee Bucks' decision to not play to today, where we stand right now, and just how the last 24 hours played out down there in Orlando.
Well, the Bucks' decision not to play, I wouldn't define it as spur of the moment, but it definitely wasn't something that was long planned. And I say this because when I was waiting there outside that locker room for something to happen, as the players came out to use the restroom, which is around the corner, they were all in uniform. So these players came to the arena prepared to play. And, you know, Scal can attest this. I mean, you put your uniform on within an hour or so of going out and playing in the game, and these guys had their uniforms on. The aftermath of that was really interesting because I know there were some players, a lot of players, that were upset by this situation unfolding without them knowing. The Bucks kind of made this decision unilaterally. They said, we're going to do this. We're going to do this on our own. And other players didn't know. And I think players wanted to hear from the Bucks and ask why they didn't bring them into the fold. But that's kind of how it all materialized over the last 12 hours or so. And here we are with players this morning deciding they were going to play.
Go ahead. How close were these guys coming to, walking away? I would imagine some guys, really considered it.
I lean more towards Scal on this one, Kyle. I mean, even the Lakers and the Clippers, who voted not to play and voted not to continue with the season, there were a lot of people in that room that I talked to that didn't see it as like a vote. Like, the Lakers didn't leave that room, and players in that room didn't think, all right, that's the last we're going to see of the Lakers and Clippers. And sure enough, 12 hours later, they turn around and they're willing to continue on with this season. I think there are players deeply, deeply affected by what's happened over the last 3 or 4 days. But the number of players that were willing to get up and leave and walk away from all this, I really think it wasn't that many.
Sherrod, let's bring you in on this. What do you think the players' thought process was these last 24 hours?
Well, I think first of all, I think there's a lot of truth to what Scal and Mannix are saying. But the one thing I will say is this: players ultimately had to decide, are we going to come any closer to achieving our goals by walking away? And I think that was the question more so than the money. And yes, the money, there's no question the money plays a factor in this. But if you have a very clear goal and you stay true to yourself that goal is to bring about systemic change and keep these issues resonating inside and outside the bubble, is walking away, going back to wherever you're from, getting out there protesting, is that going to advance your cause? And I think ultimately, at the end of the day, the players realize that's not going to get it done. And so for me, from the players' perspective, I think it was a pretty easy decision to stay in a bubble because, again, it doesn't advance the cause that you're fighting for by leaving the bubble and creating a lot of chaos, not only with you and your individual situation, but the trickle-down effect of them leaving the bubble and what that means to the CBA and just what that does to employees in all facets of work. It's just there's far too much to lose by them walking away than the game.
So the NBA is saying Friday, maybe Saturday. What are you hearing down there about the Celtics and when they actually might play? And, how do the players, I guess, return to the floor, but also keep that message alive?
Yeah, I mean, I think Saturday is more likely, is what I'm hearing down here with the resumption of the season, with the Celtics probably going on Sunday if you line it up on that calendar. I would say in moving forward, it might be beneficial for players to do more to refine their message. And I'll give an example. Like, throughout the time being down here, I've sat in and talked to players about Breonna Taylor, the EMT from Louisville who was killed back in March. And players have routinely, regularly, almost daily asked for justice for Breonna Taylor. What they want is the arrest of these police officers. But when I talk to legal experts, one thing they tell me is that prosecution of those police officers is next to impossible. So over the next month or so, as players are using their platforms, they're only going to get bigger and bigger as these games get bigger and bigger. I think refining that message is going to be important. There's a lot of things that equal justice, I think, for Breonna Taylor. It's eliminating no-knock warrants, increasing police training, getting cops like these off the street. I think that refining that message and focusing on things that they can change or they can show people will change by voting, I think that could be beneficial.
Yeah, and one thing, and I mentioned it on some of our other shows, you look at the gun lobby, NRA, big money, lobbying Congress, lobbying lawmakers. You look at the pharmaceutical companies, they lobby. You look at, the tobacco industry, they have a lobby. But where's the equal rights? Where's the social justice? We're against police brutality? And so if I'm a player, that's one thing. You talk to the owners about money and trying to lobby your local, state, and federal leaders to get some change being done.
I'm joined now by Stephanie Reddy of TNT and NBA TV. She is inside the bubble in Orlando. Stephanie, you were set to cover the other game going on, the second game, the Rockets and the Thunder. So you were in the arena. What have the last 24, 36 hours been like for you, seeing all of this unfold?
Abby, thanks so much for having me on, first of all. It has been a whirlwind. As you mentioned, I was in the arena. We were expecting that game to go on. The only reason why my antenna went up when I saw players leaving the court while warming up was because the previous game when the Milwaukee Bucks never came out to the court, and so we realized what was potentially happening in our building. But the Thunder, they were out there, not the whole team, but there were a couple of players and coaches out there shooting and warming up. And there were some Houston Rockets assistant coaches on the bench waiting for players to come out to warm up. So both sides thought they were going to be competing in a game starting at 6:30, and things changed very quickly.
No question about it. You have been on the scene. What have the players been talking to you about? And what are some of the messages that they do want to get out there?
Yeah, great question. And I will say that your Boston Celtics have been playing a huge role in this whole thing because, as you know, Abby, it was the Celtics and the Raptors that had that initial first joint team meeting when they were discussing possibly sitting out the game that was scheduled for tonight. That kind of put that out in the atmosphere, and they kind of led the way. And then in particular, Jaylen Brown has been very vocal in these player meetings, And I've talked to a few players who have said that he has been among the leaders. Obviously, Chris Paul is the president of the NBPA, and Andre Iguodala is one of the vice presidents, but Jaylen Brown also is. And they said the three of those have been the vocal voices, very passionate and leading the way, and they've done an excellent job. So you guys in Boston should be very proud of your team and specifically of Jaylen Brown. But the sentiment overall of these players is they want to get back to action. They want to play games, but they also want their messages heard. And I think that's where it gets confusing for them. They're torn because they want to play, but they don't want their play to become a distraction and detract from their messaging. So I think they're really, really working hard to try to figure out how they can accomplish both goals.
Stephanie, thank you so much for taking the time. And what I know is a very busy day. I truly appreciate it.
In a sense, you kind of feel very helpless. Here in the bubble, you feel like you want to do more. I feel like I should be out there protesting and what a lot of people are doing right now. But I'm here in a bubble playing basketball. I do think the NBA has done a great job initially to kind of give us the platform to speak on certain things and things like that. But I do kind of feel like it is kind of lessened as the playoffs have gotten started. Things have kind of diminished. I'm curious to see in what creative ways that people put their minds together to continue to push these conversations and make, me feel more comfortable about playing basketball.
All right, back here on Bigger Than Basketball, Kyle, Draper, A, Sherrod Blakely, and I'm joined by Cedric Maxwell. His number is hanging in the garden, 1981 NBA Finals MVP. All right, Max, tell me your thoughts on what you just heard Jaylen Brown said and just the last 24 hours for the NBA.
I couldn't be happier and could be more proud of how these gentlemen have conducted themselves. It is a transition. It's something that you look at players and you understand who they are. They're young players. but they've taken on a stance to me which is invaluable, because what they're going to do is lead by example. And I love the promise, the hope. And when you see a guy like Jaylen Brown, who is so young, it has just resonated to me just how good a position we are with our younger players, and just thinking about who the Celtics are. My only thing I wonder about now, when the players are talking about protesting the game and boycotting and not playing games, I'm like, this isn't checkers. This is chess. So what is the end game for the players? That's what I start thinking about when they start talking about not playing games. If you take yourself away from the microphone, then what happens is now you're out of the eyesight of the general public. You're individual. When you're collective as a group, then it's a bigger presence.
I agree, Sherrod, being collective and unified as a group. With that being said, how much can the players do, and how much is on us as individuals in society to help bring about change?
Well, the challenge that I think a lot of Black folks outside of the bubble have, that's similar to what the players are dealing with inside the bubble, is that you feel as though you are in a bubble. I mean, they're literally in one where they can't leave that campus. And for many of us in the field of journalism, for many of us who have certain feelings, we want to have this certain professional persona about us. We don't want to seem as though we're trying to have any agenda other than to try to be balanced. But you know what? There's some issues that are bigger and more impactful than basketball, that are more bigger, impactful than our profession. And we're in that type of fight right now. I applaud Jaylen Brown and a lot of those players down there for really trying to come up with ways to keep the story, to keep the narrative of systemic change being at the forefront of people's thoughts, ideas, and things of that nature. And for us on the outside, I think our role is to do whatever we can to magnify that, to make sure that we can be the change that we want to see, that we are doing the things that we are capable of doing, and that we are continuing to progress in this fight for this country, because that's really what this is about. All that we're asking for is to be treated like any other American. That's what we're talking about. I mean, when a white guy walks down the street and he's going to get a latte, he doesn't have to worry about someone grabbing their purse if he walks past, even though he probably has more money than they do. Those are issues that Black men have dealt with for as long as I've been alive. And I applaud these players for trying to do their part to change the narrative of how Black men are seen.
And Max, to Sherrod's point, and this is what frustrates me so much about this issue, because you have a segment of the population out there that says these athletes get paid millions. What do they have to complain about? Until you have to drive home in the middle of the night and you get pulled over and you say, you know what, I got to call my wife to have a witness on the phone just in case something pops off. Or until you walk into a doctor's office and you hear a 4-year-old little girl point at you and say, look, Mom, there's the bad man. Or until you have an older white lady look at you in your face and put up a cross sign and say, I hope you burn in hell, you don't understand. But yet people aren't listening, Max. And so that's what frustrates me the most. What are players supposed to do? What are we supposed to do to actually get people not only to listen, but to feel us?
Well, I think what we keep talking about is the same thing. And I believe that let's just make it straight. Let's cut to the chase.
Please.
This didn't happen yesterday. This doesn't happen tomorrow. Racism is not going away, by a click of a switch or by these players kneeling. Racism is alive and well because we continue to let it be that way. As I was telling a friend of mine, I said, he was telling me about how he teaches his son, and he was a white guy, teaches his son, said, if you're pulled over by the police, cooperate with them and make sure you stay calm. I tell my son the exact opposite. I tell my son, if you get stopped, put both your hands outside the window and then say, here are my hands. There will be no problems. And he said, well, I don't have to do. I said, I understand. You don't have to do that. And I said, that is the general thing that we're trying to talk about of just being Black in America. Doc Rivers said something to me that is going to go down like Martin Luther King. When Doc Rivers said that we love America, and I'm paraphrasing him, but America doesn't love us back. My kids and my kids' kids will hear that line forever because it was precise, it was passionate, and it was to a point. Doc Rivers' father was a police officer, so he's lived on that side of the street. And Doc Rivers is a Black man who's lived in this country. So I think this just went a long ways when I think about how we are as a society and where we need to go.
And Sherrod, I agree with everything Max says. You know, I feel like, you know, our skin color at times is being weaponized out there. And for those people that say, well, Jalen got millions, LeBron got millions, let's talk about where they came from. You know, before the millions, before any of that, they were young Black men, young Black boys in America, Sherrod.
And you know what? There's still young Black men in America, because when you talk about the economic advances that a lot of these NBA players made, and it is something that is worth taking note of. As you know, Max mentioned earlier, Doc Rivers, his house got burned down in San Antonio because he was Black. He was still an NBA player, still making millions. That did not stop his house from getting burned down. When you look at Sterling Brown in Milwaukee, getting pulled over, tasered, because he was parked illegally at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning in front of a drugstore.
And nobody was there.
That didn't do him any good. It didn't do him any good. I mean, you start going down the line. There are example after example after example of affluent Black men who are, frankly, they're living the American dream, and yet they're dealing with things that if they were white, you know damn well they wouldn't be dealing with. And that, to me, that's when I think about what Doc Rivers said the other day that Max pointed out, that's the hurtful part. That's the hurtful part. We have tried to do things by the playbook that we're given. Go to a good school, keep your nose out of trouble, do all those things. And yet we still find, even when we do have all those, check off all those boxes, we still are treated less than human.
And let's say this. And here's the thing I'll say: we're not angry. We're just telling you the truth. This is how this is work. That we are just telling you the basic truth. That all you want is a chance to live fair. We want your kids to grow up in situations. And what I applaud about these young Black men or these young players right now is the fact that they have put their monies where their mouth is. LeBron James went out and built a school to educate people in Akron. And if they graduated from his school, they are given a scholarship to go to college. This is how we're going to impact the next generation, that these players have to take a stand. You might not like it, but if they take a stand and they're doing something positive, that's how we're going to move forward. That is how we're going to, damn it, move forward.
And Max, LeBron said it the other day, we're scared. Black people are scared. But I'm going to take it a step further. We're hurt right now. You know, we're sad right now. Here we are in 2020, and we're still dealing with the same issues our parents dealt with, our grandparents dealt with. You know, this is 2020 has been a crazy year. We know that. But we're hurting right now, and I guess we want people to listen to us and feel, you know, our pain. With that being said, Max, you've been a member of the Celtics organization for years. We're seeing not only the players, but ownership, you know, speak out and take a stand as well. How impactful do you think ownership, the franchise, the league can be in all of this?
Well, here's the thing that I believe. When you start seeing people of color here in Boston, the three of us right now on air, how can I be in Boston for 25 years and essentially be the only analyst for one of these teams as a play-by-play guy? That you have the Patriots, you have the Bruins, you have soccer, and we have to change that. In the sense, even with the Celtics, I've talked to the ownership and said that you have to have more Black representation in the front office. I'm not asking for a job. But I want that is how you're going to have people being included in situations when you have people in positions of power who are making decisions. Like when people ask me questions about it, they say, well, Max, how do you feel? And that, well, I feel a certain way, but I don't have the power to make a change. I want to see people in the Boston area in a situation where they are in management that they can cause and they can make change.
Sherrod, 30 to 45 seconds, final thoughts.
You know, just kind of piggybacking off what Max said, you know, he's talking about having a voice in the room. There are places and locations where the decisions are made. And frankly, when it comes to people of color, we're not in those rooms. So when people make those decisions, they go with what they feel is the right fit. And often that fit is whatever they see when they walk past the mirror. And guess what? Don't look like us. And that it's an issue in Boston. It's an issue in a lot of cities. So that, to me, Max is spot on. I mean, until we start getting at the core of what a lot of the issues are, which is having more decision makers, we're just going to be running this marathon over and over again with no end in sight.
All right, Sherrod Blakely and Cedric Maxwell, thanks for joining us. Great conversation as always, fellas. We hope to continue this conversation and really enact some change in our country.